Hi, you're listening to The Sociology Show, a podcast about absolutely anything to do with the wonderful world of sociology. Whether you're a teacher, a lecturer, a student, or just taking a passing interest, this podcast will look at a range of issues from social class, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, religion, crime, education, and anything else that sociology has to offer. My name is Matthew Wilkin, and each episode I will speak to someone working in the field of sociology and let them explain all about their own interests, their research, and their experiences. So, put your earphones in, turn the volume up, and let's be sociology geeks together, eh? Hello and welcome to The Sociology Show. The Sociology Show podcast is brought to you in association with Tutor2U Sociology, the exam performance specialists for A-level and GCSE sociology students and teachers. You can visit their website at tutor2u.net/sociology, and there you can pick up revision guides, flashcards, revision videos, and everything else that you need for your A-level or GCSE sociology studies. The Sociology Show podcast is also sponsored by Collins. And Collins produce high-quality student books, teacher guides, and unbeatable value revision for GCSE and A-level sociology. Sociology Show listeners can get 25% off Collins Sociology resources. Simply go to collins.co.uk/sociology and enter the code Sociology Show at the checkout, and terms and conditions do apply. So without further ado, let's go over to my interviewee for this episode. It's Professor Iain Borden. Hi Ian, thank you very much for joining me on the Sociology Show. Would you like to start by telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do, please?
Well, thanks for inviting me. Yeah, I'm Iain Borden. I am I'm a Professor of Architecture and Urban Culture at the Bartlett, which is the Faculty of the Built Environment at University College London. I'm trained as an architectural historian, and I've been a skateboarder since the late 1970s.
Fantastic, thank you. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I teach at a college called Basvic in Hove, and you're a key part of our youth subcultures topic. The particular area of Brighton, we have quite a lot of skaters, so I've always been fascinated and interested in your research. So I hope to talk to you in quite some detail about that, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brighton's been a big centre, a hotspot of skateboarding activity in Britain, at least since the 1970s. So Pig City, it was originally known as by skaters in the 70s.
Yeah, that's really interesting you say that, actually, because obviously there's a big skate park in Brighton near me, but I went to university in Portsmouth as well, and Southsea Skate Park was a little bit special as well.
Yeah, Southsea along the coast from there was really big. Yeah, the skate park there. I think it was built by Antoukas, who were a tennis court company. Anyhow, but like many skate parks in the 70s, they were built by people who were trying their hand at skateboarding. So yeah, I went to Southsea Skate Park in about 1979 for the first time.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Before we get onto the skateboarding bit, you just mentioned your kind of background, your area is architecture and history. So I'm really interested to know how that ties up and marries up with the sociology.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sort of long story. So I'm trained in different kinds of history. I did my first degree in architectural history, art history, ancient Greek military history. Then I did a master's in architectural history at the Bartlett, UCL, where I now teach. And I wrote my master's dissertation on a piece of cooperative housekeeping in the garden city of Letchworth. And the cooperative housekeeping project was called Homesgarth. And it was a place for middle-class people to live together and have a sort of middle-class life, but to take their meals in common. So they had a kind of shared restroom. So think Oxbridge College. It was designed and looked like a quadrangle. And I could find out everything I could about that building in terms of the architects, its design, why they built it, what they wanted to achieve. But what I couldn't find out, or very little about, was the people who actually lived in the project once it was built. And it raised a question in my mind that most architectural history is about the designers and production. It's all about the building. And then, as it were, the moment the building is finished, the history stops. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting to know more about the kind of the afterlife of the building? When people are actually in it and using it. So I've probably spent, so that was 1986. And I've probably spent, my academic career since then trying to answer that question as to, how do you construct an architectural history that isn't just about architects and buildings as objects? So that was the first sort of bit of that puzzle. The second bit of the puzzle is that I then went to I didn't finish, but I started my PhD at UCLA, University of California in Los Angeles. And while I was there, two things happened. One, I took a sort of specialist study in the work of the French Marxist philosopher Henri Lefebvre, who has rather a lot to say about the production of social space and everyday life, the importance of everyday life. And then secondly, I was in a graduate seminar class as a student, graduate class, and we were asked to write something about Los Angeles that no one else in the class knew about. And I thought, well, what do I know about LA that no one else here knows? And a lot of them were Californians or Americans. And I thought, well, I know something about skateboarding because I've been a skateboarder on and off for sort of 10 years by that point. So that's where it all sort of started to come together. This question of how do you write about cities and buildings that's to do with people? How do you bring the ideas of Henri Lefebvre in? Because I was very interested in those. And, what about using skateboarding as the vehicle to pursue that? So long story short, I wrote my PhD, which was really a kind of Lefebvrean history of architecture. To answer this question, how do you write about the sort of the way buildings are experienced, and using skateboarding and the way skateboarders use public spaces and streets as a way to do this. So I guess those are the elements of that puzzle.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that insight as well. I was really interested as well. Actually, you said about going to South Sea Skate Park at the end of the 70s and so on. I always associate the boom of skateboarding sort of being mid-80s, Back to the Future, that sort of thing. But was there a sort of a boom that precedes that then?
Yeah. Well, there were several booms. Actually, the first boom in skateboarding that most people don't know about is the early 1960s, which is the kind of origins of skateboarding when, most skateboarders were in Australia or California and maybe bits of Florida, and they were kind of frustrated surfers. And there was a huge boom in skateboarding, 63, 64, 65, and it was often referred to as sidewalk surfing. And the boards were pretty crude, very small, flat bits of wood, very rudimentary metal trucks that were normally taken off roller skates, and wheels that were either made out of metal or were made out of something called clay, but which is a kind of composite of ceramic and some other materials. And that was the first boom. And then it crashed in the Christmas of 1965. A lot of the manufacturers had over provided and oversupplied. And then the next big boom is sort of 73 through 79, when particularly around 1973, people start using polyurethane for skateboard wheels. And this is the sort of the big revolution in skateboard technology, which makes the wheels smoother and faster and grippier, and they don't stop every time they hit a tiny little bit of grit on the sidewalk. And then wider boards and better trucks and so on, and the use of grip tape so you could ride a board with shoes on without slipping off it. And that's really the big boom that a lot of people still think of, and it kind of explodes into the UK 76, 77 as an American import. And you get nationwide television program on the BBC run a skateboard competition, and the Sun newspaper runs a skateboard competition, and in London, the London Evening News runs the National Skateboard Championships in Crystal Palace in southeast London, which is actually not far from where I'm sitting right now. And there are, for 76, 77, it's what every kid wants for Christmas is a skateboard, kind of. And then you also get, to meet that demand, this explosion of skate parks, purpose-designed places for kids, and it is still mostly kids at that time, to skateboard. And you get about 100 of these built all over the UK, and across every other country in the world. But in the UK, there were about 100. Some of them very, very good. Some of them appallingly bad, almost unrideable. Southsea, I would say, was in the middle. It was kind of good fun, not the best, but far from the worst as well. And some of them were, quite extensive. And weirdly, very few skate parks anywhere in the world still survive. The only real, proper, decent, good-sized skate park in America is in Florida, is Kona in Florida. But all the others are gone. Whereas weirdly in the UK, we've got several that still survive from the 1970s. So Southsea is one, Rom in Hornchurch in Essex is another, and that's been Grade 2 listed. There's another one in Harrow. There's another one in Stevenage. There's another one, it's early 80s in Livingston, just outside of Edinburgh. So for some reason, that maybe it's a different story, but the UK is the epicenter of 1970s survivor skate parks.
And one of the things that I'm interested in, obviously, we had that boom in the 70s. Obviously, we did have that boom in the 80s. Unlike a lot of youth subcultures, it's something that goes in and back out of fashion. We're back on another peak again now. What do you think it is about skating that it sort of doesn't go away, if you like? Its popularity maintains.
Well, it nearly went away in the early 80s. I mean, the very early 80s, if you saw someone with a board, they were your friend for life because there weren't any other skateboarders around. It really did crash. But yeah, by the mid 80s, it had picked up again. Probably fueled, by Hollywood movies, Back to the Future, some new manufacturer videos of skateboarding had come out at that time. But I mean, it was a new scene. So what was happening in the mid-80s, so the 70s was kind of skate park riding. The 80s, mid-80s was wooden ramp skateboarding, and a bit of nascent street skateboarding. The 90s was full on street skating. You rode in city plazas, down city streets, almost to the detriment of everything else. 2000s, you start to get the return of skate parks. So, which is a big factor. And by that point, you've had Tony Hawk's PlayStation game, and also the X Games have started to feature skateboarding. But then I think in the 2010s, in the last 10 years or so, it's been a combination of factors. We've had loads more skate parks built again. We've had an increasing diversity of skateboarders. So they're not just white male kids anymore. They're of all sexes, genders, gender identities, ages, and socioeconomic backgrounds, and all over the world, and so forth. But I think the other thing that's really made the big difference with skateboarding is that in the 90s it was seen as a sort of subcultural, countercultural activity. And, partly this was how skateboarding marketed itself, as a sort of transgressive, aggressive, almost anti-capitalist subculture. But now it's still that, there's a part of that that's still in skateboarding. But rather than seen as by, I think, city authorities as a problem, as it was seen in the 90s, how How do we keep these aggressive people off our city streets? Now it's seen part of a solution. And it's a solution to the problem of how do we have sustainable, healthy communities. So skateboarding is seen and is an activity which helps form communities, helps form intergenerational communities, keeps people healthy in mind and body, creates entrepreneurial activity, creates creativity, develops robustness, develops resilience, all these kinds of things. So skateboarding is suddenly, well, maybe not suddenly, but is now, a positive benefit to communities and society in a way that perhaps it always has been, but wasn't necessarily perceived as being by skaters themselves as well as other people.
The Sociology Show podcast relies on the kind contributions of sponsorship and donations. If you enjoy the show, then you can help with the hosting costs by donating as little as £5 on the GoFundMe page. Simply visit uk.gofundme.com and search for the Sociology Show. If you can donate, then you will be sent a Sociology Show pen as a small thank you for your continued support of the show.
I actually spoke to Dr. Paul O'Connor, who researches skateboarding as well, and that was his biggest point that he made, actually, that sort of changing the dynamic of who actually takes it up. He's done a lot of research on female skateboarders, for example. Why do you think that is, Ian? Why do you think in its most recent boom it's kind of opened its market up to a far wider range of people?
Well, the funny thing about skateboarding is it's not heavily controlled by any one organisation. Yes, there is now a governing body for skateboarding in the UK, Skateboard GB, who do great work. Yes, there are some manufacturers, like Vans in particular, the shoe company, who represent skateboarding. But it's quite open and flat. So I don't think it's so much that, in a funny way, that skateboarding, someone has opened it up. It's more that more people have taken it up, if you see what I mean. Yeah. It's kind of bubbled up from below. And I think there's all kinds of different reasons for that. I think skate parks, the availability of skate parks has been a massive one. That, there is an element of transgressive street skating that it's seen often as being a male activity, being out in city streets on your own or in a small group at 2 a.m. doing a semi-illegal transgressive activity, and marketed as being by the skate brand sometimes as being that way, is not always conducive to skaters of a different kind of attitude. So skate parks kind of open that up. And with skate parks, you get lessons, you get a sense of more open entitlement of all different people to use the skate park. I think undoubtedly Sky Brown and the Olympics has been a massive thing. As the Tokyo Olympics, Sky Brown, British skater, got a bronze medal. And even before the actual competition itself, was already a huge role model for young girls and women and lots of other people that just thought, it's interesting to see different skaters of different body sizes and genders and so on. You've got things like Skatism magazine, which actively promotes skateboarding by LGBTQ plus communities. You've got social media, which I think have bypassed the old skate magazines. So, which had a kind of editorial censorship over what was seen in the skateboarding world. So now any group of any constitution can build a community on Instagram or wherever. So I think all these things have, kind of coalesced to make it more open. And there is this sort of basic thing about skateboarding that at its heart is it's quite simple. It's not expensive. Even a top-class skateboard is £150, but most people, start at way below that. And you only need yourself and maybe one or two friends to do it. You don't need to buy carbon fiber foam cord snowboard and travel to the Alps to do it with all the costs involved. You don't need to find 21 other people and book a pitch on Hackney Marshes and agree to meet at 11 a.m. and on Sunday and join a league and go training every third Tuesday in the month, to do it. It's much more kind of spontaneously accessible. So I think you're finding people are just finding routes into skateboarding because of its sort of porous constitution.
Yeah, the accessibility. It's almost is it classified as a street sport, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really class. So if you're if you're sports council and you're interested in the Olympics and winning medals, skateboarding's a sport. If you are me or someone like me, it's a sort of an important part of your life and part of your cultural makeup. If you're a kid who, plays football on a Sunday morning and plays Fortnite and you fancy a bit of skateboarding, it's just one of the things you do along with other things. If you're, 21 years old and a couple of your mates have got longboards and you fancy trying it too, it's just one of the many things that you can pick up and try. And all those engagements with skateboarding are equally valid. I think that's one of the things about it. It used to be sort of in the 90s, this idea that you either had to, kind of live and die skateboarding with every breath that you took, kind of a skater to the core, skater to the max. And some people are still like that. And that's great, but you don't have to be that. There are lots of other provisional and temporary and partial skaters out there, which is great.
Yeah, I'm really interested in kind of the diversity of age as well. At one end of the scale, like you said, you've got Sky Brown, who I think is still 13 years old. If you go to the skate park in Brighton, like you said, you'll see a lot of the original guys, grey-haired guys having a go on their skateboard up and down as well, which I just love the fact that it's not restrictive in that respect.
Yeah, no, and actually that's a lovely part of it. And it's quite interesting, quite a lot of the youth workers that I speak to are quite interested in that. So you start to get intergenerational communities forming. So I live in Southeast London. I'm quite near Crystal Palace. We've got a fantastic skate park there. It's got a range of different kind of terrains in it, kind of flat street course things which are suitable for beginners. There's all the way through to quite a deep and challenging pool. And I skate there. I mostly just skate the pool. But you get kids who, are 5, and I'm 60 this year. So you've got 55 years of at least of range of people. And everyone talks to each other, so the sort of 5-6-year-old come up to you and go, "That's a funny looking board, mister," and you get, and that's a lovely part of it. And skate parks in particular, I always describe them as that they're not sports facilities. They're kind of like a village green. They're a social space at which people happen to skateboard. And if you go to a skate park and watch what's happening, it's quite interesting. It can be, quite a big place, but at any one moment, probably only 4 or 5 people are actually skateboarding. Most people are, they're standing around watching, they're waiting their turn. A lot of people spend a lot of time just talking to each other, and chatting and, about anything between, who's the hottest boy, girl in the group opposite if they're younger, or, complaining about their backache or latest injury if they're older, and everything in between.
I love that. And in terms of your texts about skating, Iain, you've written 2 books, is that right?
Yeah, so the first book I did, it was based on my PhD. It was pretty much a reprint of my doctoral thesis, which was called Skateboarding Space in the City. And then, and it stayed in print for, that came out 2001, and it's been in print sort of the whole time. And after about 15, 16 years, the publishers came to me and said, would you do an update? And I thought, oh no, I don't want to do that. And then I thought, well, maybe I should. And I thought, 2 or 3 months, I'll update a few dates and correct a few errors, and it'll be out again. Anyway, it took me 3 years to effectively completely rewrite it. So the second book, Skateboarding and the City, so it's sort of similar but not exactly the same title, is a sort of, it's the original book, but completely rewritten and expanded. So some of the chapters are the same, but they're also, as I say, completely kind of rewritten and updated. And then there's sort of lots of new chapters on everything that's happened in skateboarding since kind of 2000, which is quite a lot. Because the first book was largely about 70s skate parks and street skating in the 90s. Whereas the new book is much more about this new world of skateboarding, which is still subcultural in part, but is much more diverse in who the riders are, what they think, the different cultures they engage with, the artworks that they produce, the businesses that they create, all that range of stuff. So I prefer the new book. But interestingly, I was talking to a skater in Chile yesterday, and he was saying that he prefers the original book because the original book has got much more Henri Lefebvre kind of Marxist theory in it as well. I kind of detuned that out of the second book. But so if you want the full Lefebvrean Marxist version, go to the first one.
Thank you. I was going to ask you about that because A-level students quite often obsessed, when we mention a sociologist, they say, what type of sociologist are they? Are they a Marxist? Are they a postmodernist? Do you define yourself in any way, Ian?
No, I'm kind of, like a lot of academics, I guess, I've got a sort of democratic socialist left-wing-ish kind of take on things. I mean, I have particularly pursued the kind of Henri Lefebvrean politics and stressing the importance of everyday life. So, I mean, one of the things that I think is that skateboarding does is it shows this sort of Lefebvrean idea that ultimately what matters in people's lives is the quality of their everyday life and their thoughts, their values, their sex, their food, their conversations. And that skateboarding is kind of an example of a practice that gives people real meaning in their everyday daily lives. And then the other kind of Lefebvrean thing is this thing that he postulates in his book La Production de l'espace, the production of space, which was published in 1974, so getting on for 50 years ago now, is that urban space is a social product and that we make it. It's not a pre-natural thing. We make it ourselves out of objects, ideas and experiences. And skateboarding kind of obviously does that. The objects, the skateboards and the buildings and the surfaces, the ideas are, the photographs, the names of the moves, the conception of skateboarding, but the experience is the bodily practice of it. And so skateboarding kind of brings all that together. So that's how that's probably how I've mostly followed a kind of politics of urban space.
Yeah, you can see why skateboarding did become like a religion for some then, as you said, those that live and breathe it.
Yeah, if you want to, it can inform everything that you do, and I've got friends and who do that. It's a funny activity because there's skateboarding itself and the act of it, but it does also translate because skateboard's a fairly basic tool, and you take it to something, the street, the skate park. And through your bodily action, you reimagine what that street skate park can be used for. So, there are no set I mean, yes, there are tricks and there's kind of etiquette in skateboarding, but in the end, it's a kind of creative practice. It's like giving someone a piece of paper and a pen, or giving them a camera. Everyone will produce something different with it. And it's an inherently kind of critical creative act. And what comes with it, I think, also then translates to other activities. So, this idea of being critical, this idea of being creative, this idea that there aren't necessarily set rules, or if there are, it's okay to break them and bend them. There are other things in skateboarding that I think are really interesting, one of which is it's a very flat kind of democratic hierarchy. If the world's most famous skateboarder, Tony Hawk, rocked up to my local skate park tomorrow, yes, a lot of people would stand around and watch, but a lot of people would skate with him, which is the complete opposite, and they would, he would expect that. Or if Sky Brown did it, she would expect it. And everyone would take turns to skate alongside them, and they would take turns to skate alongside everybody else. So there's this sort of kind of funny thing in skateboarding that you can be ultra world famous, but you're still not treated as a star, and so, some people I'm sure are very rich and famous and so on through it, but that's not kind of why people do it. People do it in the end because they enjoy it, and if they happen to get rich and famous through doing it, well, that's almost a side effect of it. And it's a very different way of dealing with the world. There was very interesting when skateboarding was in the Olympics. There was I was reading in The Guardian, and there were a few people writing in about I think the question is, Guardian was asking its readers, what did you like best about the Olympics? And a retired architect wrote in and said, I really like the skateboarding. And his point was that, one, it was kind of amazing to watch and was a spectacle. He said, but the really thing that was amazing was how the skateboarders congratulated each other and seemed to be engaged in a kind of collaborative competition. And then he said, actually, we've all got something to learn about this. This is a really good way to live your life. And I thought that was, in a way, that's what I end up saying at the end of my book, Skateboarding in the City, is that when you skate, you're trying hard, but you're challenging yourself, but you're not trying to outdo other people in a sort of beat them kind of way. It's a much more open form of creative competition. And that, I think, is one of the things that really translates across from skateboarding to other activities.
That's fantastic. That's great. I wholeheartedly agree with that. That was the biggest point that I took away from the Olympics. Even if one of the skaters fell, didn't make the move that they were trying to do, it was all such good nature. That's what really struck me beyond anything else.
I mean, those skaters, they wanted to win, make no mistake about it. They wanted to win, but it wasn't, that kind of steely, determined, kind of deathly kill the competition kind of thing that you see in other, in other sports. And that's partly how it's structured. Skateboarding isn't a race. Well, not most skateboarding isn't a race. Most skateboarding isn't like, tennis, where you're trying to beat the person on the other side of the net, or score more goals than the other team. It is more performative. So it's in the sort of nature and the structure of it. But it's also, I don't think any skater would want to win a competition through any kind of foul means. Yeah. It has a sort of authentic self of commitment in it.
Thank you, Iain. Just before we round off, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to perhaps give out some details if people wanted to find out a little bit more about your work or follow you on Twitter at all.
Yeah, you can find I'm Iain Borden, all one word, on Twitter and on Instagram. and Skateboarding in the City is available from all good bookshops if you want to read some more about from that book.
That's great. Thank you so much for your time today, and really, really do appreciate it.
I appreciate you asking me. Thanks. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to the podcast. If you would like to contact the show or be interviewed, then please email the Sociology Show podcast at gmail.com.